U.S. troops or U.S. tanks in the capital, and Iraqi forces are still in control of their defensive positions in the city and also key government buildings and installations. There are a number of journalists, including myself, who've been around to different parts of Baghdad and not seen any evidence of U.S. troops on the ground here. And people here have been buoyed by the sight of Saddam Hussein on Iraqi television last night, greeting people in a residential area of Baghdad. And also today in the streets, a number of police cars were going around waving the Iraqi flag and using their sirens to signal a victory at the airport. But the picture will only become clearer in the coming hours.
That was correspondent Lara Logan in Baghdad. Gretchen.
Thanks, Russ. The Bush administration is looking ahead now to what will happen after Saddam Hussein's regime is gone. Joey Chen is keeping tabs on developments at the Pentagon for us this morning. Joey, good morning to you.
Good morning, Gretchen. We are discouraged here. Reporters here at the Pentagon are being discouraged from seeing this mission as being complete or even nearly complete. A senior Defense Department official, for example, describing that situation that correspondent Jim Axelrod described to you just a few minutes ago, that tour of the Armored Brigade up toward the airport on the long road leading up to the airport. He described it as a very serious situation with fighting being sporadic with local forces there, but quite fierce. And he underlined that point several times. He did warn that the U.S. did sustain some casualties on this tour, perhaps even at least one death on this brief mission, but saying it is important from CENTCOM headquarters today, an important signal of what the forces can do there.
It was, I think, a clear statement of the ability of the coalition forces to move into Baghdad at times and places of their choosing, and to establish their presence really wherever they need to in the city. And those kinds of operations, I believe, will continue.
And this is also typical of what is going on, according to sources here. The forces are picking away at particular areas around the city, sort of eating away bits by bit and section across the city of Baghdad, picking out certain areas, moving in there, clearing out enemy forces, making sure these areas are secure, and then bringing in additional reinforcements to provide greater security in those areas so that they can move forward and can take greater control. Latest clashes near the airport involve both irregular and regular special Republican Guard forces as well, but the sources here describe this as being small numbers of Republican Guard forces, and it remains unclear how large the force of Special Republican Guards are within the city of Baghdad. That could be very important to the U.S. strategy as it maneuvers through the city, and very important for them to understand how much of a Republican Guard resistance they're going to find within the city. It's also important in key areas just south of the city. They say that two big roads come together just south of the city. They're consolidating, the United States and coalition forces are consolidating their resources there in order to be able to affirm that this area is secure before they move up into Baghdad and make sure that everything is safe in this area. And as correspondent Lara Logan said to us just a few minutes ago, she was talking about the sounds she is hearing from both the southwest and southeastern parts of the city. That would be pretty indicative that they are maneuvering in that area just below the city to make sure that area is secure. Gretchen?
Joey Chen live for us at the Pentagon this morning. Thanks for the update. Russ?
The first American journalist to die covering the war in Iraq has been described as a man who was born to write. Michael Kelly, who was an editor for the Atlantic Monthly and a columnist for the Washington Post, was traveling with the Army's 3rd Infantry Division. He died in a Humvee accident Thursday night near Baghdad. Alan Shearer knew him well. Mr. Shearer is the editorial director of the Washington Post Writers Group, which syndicated Michael Kelly's column. Alan, good morning to you.
Good morning, Russ.
For those of us who did not know Michael very well, how would you describe him to us? What kind of guy was he?
Well, he was a great guy to be around. I mean, he was intellectually rigorous with a quick sense of humor, devoted family man, and personally, he was almost chivalrous.
What were his thoughts about covering this war? He share any concerns with you?
Not really, no. I mean, every time we talk, we would say something like, Mike, are you being careful? Everything all right? He said, I'm fine, and don't worry, don't worry. And at one point he said, look, I've got the whole Army around me here.
Did he talk to you about why he wanted to cover this war?
No, he didn't, but, you know, I don't think he needed to. He covered the first Gulf War, and at some point after the war had walked into northern Iraq on foot from Iran. He covered Bosnia, and I think he wanted to go back to Gulf War II and finish the job.
As you said, I'm sorry, go ahead, Alan.
I was just going to say the reporters in the first Gulf War were pretty much kept behind the lines, and the opportunity for Mike to be there and to cover it firsthand, I think, was irresistible.
I was going to ask you, what did he think about this whole embedding program?
What did he think about it?
What did he think about it?
I think he thought it was a wonderful opportunity, and he kept pushing to be as close to the front as possible.
I understand just a few days ago that Michael told ABC News that he did not consider his Iraq assignment overly dangerous. Are you telling me at no point in your conversations with him did he ever talk about what he was seeing and any danger that he may have felt at the time?
Well, at one point he described interviewing a lieutenant colonel and having to drop to the ground, everybody having to drop to the ground 3 times in 10 minutes because of incoming missiles. And that was in his column that he wrote on Wednesday, the last one we had. But he never talked in terms of being afraid.
Yeah. Alan, how do you...
Mike was a very courageous reporter, you know.
Yeah.
He would go to places like this and just bring back tremendous stuff.
Alan, how do you think Michael would want his readers to remember him?
I think he'd want to be remembered as a great reporter who had a wonderful story to tell. On his last day, the last time I talked to him was Wednesday. And he called me and started to dictate his column. We had to dictate by a sat phone. That's the only way he could get out. And we were 150 words in or so, and he said, "Holy smokes, we're just crossing the Euphrates. I've got to rewrite." And half an hour later, he called back and described the interview with the colonel, with the incoming missiles, and dictated the column that appeared in newspapers Thursday and thereafter.
Alan Shearer, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Russ.
We also want to pass on our condolences to Michael Kelly's family, including his wife, Madeline. Max Kelly, our friend who worked here at CBS for years, and their 2 children. Our thoughts are with you. Gretchen?
Okay, Russ. The family of Army Private Jessica Lynch heads to Germany today for a reunion. America's best-known POW is recovering from several surgeries, including a back operation at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany. Military officials say Lynch suffered a head wound and fractures in her right arm, both legs, her right foot and ankle, also an injury to her spine. President Bush is granting health officials the power to quarantine patients with SARS. It's the first time in 2 decades the White House has taken such a precaution. More than 2,300 people have been infected now with the flu-like virus, primarily in Asia, and more than 80 people have now died. The disease is believed to have originated in China.
College basketball fans can tune in today to the NCAA Men's Final Four. In the national semifinals, Marquette will play Kansas beginning at 6 o'clock Eastern, and Syracuse is going to take on Texas at the Superdome in New Orleans at 8:30. And, of course, you can watch all the action right here on CBS. And the finals Monday night.
You already said
But Australia does plan to send experts to Iraq to aid the interim government. That is also according to the Age newspaper. The report says that the government has agreed to send public servants in fields such as agriculture, but officials hope the country's involvement will be short-lived. And that is the latest from the MSNBC Listening Post. Stories, headlines, making news around the world. As U.S. troops close in on Baghdad, they are coming across Iraqi weapons arsenals. NBC's Kerry Sanders is with the 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines in Diwaniyah today. They discovered an unusually large weapons stash, and he has this exclusive report.
I'm Kerry Sanders with the 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines. We're about 100 miles south of Baghdad, where they have made a rather huge discovery of a weapons cache that certainly exceeds anything the Marines ever expected to find. That is one of the bunkers. You can see the earth up along the side. Well, they found 120 bunkers just like that in this area, inside a tremendous supply of ammunition. One Marine said that if you took all the ammunition at Camp Lejeune and all the ammunition at Camp Pendleton, which are the 2 main bases for the U.S. Marines, it would be larger here than they have combined back home. That's how large it is. Now, there have been teams that have been going through each of the bunkers. They're putting on their chemical, biological gear as they go in, and they're cataloging what they're finding in each of these bunkers. They're finding anti-tank mines, they're finding anti-personnel mines, items that could easily have taken out perhaps some U.S. tanks that may have been approaching. Somewhat of a surprise to the lieutenant colonel here that this was not used in the war.
The size of this dump indicates to me that it supported a large regular military organization, possibly divisional size. There's just way too much ammo here for it to support anything much smaller than that.
And it's here. It's not on the battlefield.
It's sitting in an ammunition supply dump with a fence around it, in bunkers and inside of buildings, not used on a battlefield, which is, interesting. It suggests to me that they didn't really want to use it, that the military organization who was responsible for this chose not to use it on a battlefield, which is good for us. Shows me they probably didn't have a stomach for the fight to die for Saddam Hussein.
You're going through each bunker, and it's 120 bunkers. What are you doing in cataloging, and what are you looking for in there?
You really got to kind of catalog it first time on the scene. You kind of catalog it by building so that the EOD, explosive ordnance people that come in and get rid of it, have an idea what's there, and so that you have an idea what's there. And also, like any place else in theater, I'm sure, anytime you come upon any kind of ammunition cache, you want to make sure that there's no nuclear, biological, chemical weapons there. And that's what we're trying to do now.
There's been a big hunt, really, for that smoking gun as this war has continued.
Sure, absolutely. You know, it's one of the reasons that we're here, and if you were to find it, I think it would be an important thing for everybody concerned.
In most cases, when the Marines have come across large weapons supplies, they've gathered them all together and blown them up, but it's actually so large here that they fear that not only would it be dangerous, but if they did gather this all up and lit the fuse, as it were, and blew it up, that you'd probably hear the explosion all the way down in Kuwait. Kerry Sanders, NBC News, near Diwaniyah, Iraq.
While the majority of attention has been paid to the intense fighting around Baghdad and also to the south, there are significant battles going on in northern Iraq. Retired Marine Lieutenant General Bernard Traynor joins me again in our war room to discuss what's going on there. Yeah, we've been talking about so much activity happened just in the last day south of Baghdad and in Baghdad, but there's still a lot of activity up north. First of all, tell us, what were the plans for the northern part of the country before the war started, and how have they played out?
Well, the original plan was to have the 4th Mechanized Infantry Division come over here in Turkey and then attack south from here towards Baghdad and secure the oil fields in the process.
Right, but we know what happened with the Turkey agreement, and that didn't happen.
Didn't happen at all. So the alternate plan was play the Afghan card. We put in special forces, a handful of special forces, people to control airstrikes, and a couple of thousand paratroopers in the area to meet up with the Kurds, who have kind of carved out in this area kind of a semi-autonomous region. And what they have done now, and the Kurds numbered originally about 3,000. That number has been increasing over the days and the weeks. That now maybe they're up to about 5,000 or so. But they are, with the special forces people, moving slowly down towards Mosul. And the idea is to drive the Republican Guard out of the area and secure the airfields.
You mentioned Republican Guard because that is where their Republican Guards still exist.
Republican Guards are up there.
And you have compared the war in the north with the Afghan war. Why is that?
Well, because they have the special forces there. They don't have tanks. They don't have lots of infantry. They have these small special forces people that are embedded in with the Kurds, and they're calling in the airstrikes on the Republican Guard that are defending Mosul and Kirkuk. Most of the air attacks are coming from the aircraft carriers that are in the eastern Mediterranean. And they'll call them in and run the strikes, very successful strikes on the Iraqis. The Iraqis are slowly falling back into the defense of Mosul itself.
Do you feel that the activity we're seeing up here, even though it is north of Baghdad, miles and miles away, it's going to affect securing Baghdad?
No, not really.
So
I mean, this is kind of a separate set in the war plan. I can't conceive of these units being pulled down to defend Baghdad, and if they did get the orders, they would be giving up all. This is the largest oil field in Iraq, plus the fact en route to Baghdad they'd be decimated by American air power.
What about this? Any major battles in the north, the way that we saw in the south?
No, it's a gradual sort of thing. There's been a fight for the last couple of days of a bridge on the approaches to Mosul that has swayed back and forth between the two. But this is kind of a low-grade war compared to what's happening in the Baghdad area and south of Baghdad all the way down to Basra.
Okay, and you mentioned the Kurds. Again, they're fighting a major role in this area.
Yeah, and see, there are there are two groups. And they fight one another under normal circumstances, but they have united in this particular instance against the Iraqis and also against any possible Turkish incursion into this northern region, which they would oppose. And one of the reasons we have the Americans up there is to not only protect the oil field, to keep the Kurds from fighting one another, but also to keep the Kurds and the Turks from fighting one another.
A lot going on in the north.
It's a very complex Machiavellian war up there.
Okay, thank you very much for that look at northern Iraq and the activity there. We're going to head back now to Doha, Qatar, where David Schuster is standing by live. David, I understand you have some breaking news from there.
Well, Bianca, something that to dangle in front of you when you talk about northern Iraq. Officials here at Central Command are confirming that a couple of large pockets of opposition enemy forces on the battlefield, and we're talking, of course, away from Baghdad. According to officials here, those forces are ready to surrender and capitulate. Unfortunately, they are not saying where in Iraq these forces are. They're not saying whether it is northern Iraq or the remnants of the forces in southern Iraq that are still fighting, but in any case, they're saying that General Franks was told this morning by his commanders that a large pocket of enemy troops are ready to surrender. In addition, General Franks has been briefed on Chemical Ali this morning, and he has been told that that forces down in Basra have now identified Chemical Ali's bodyguard as having been at the site where the F-14 dropped those precision-guided munitions, and forces there are now looking through the rubble to try and make a positive identification with Chemical Ali himself. And we've also gotten word that the figure that was used yesterday of 2,000 Iraqis killed when the U.S. troops rumbled their way into central Baghdad, we're told that that figure is low, that it may be as many as 3,000 Iraqi troops, paramilitary, Special Republican Guard, intelligence service types who are firing at the M1A1 Abrams tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles. As many as 3,000 Iraqis were killed during that incursion yesterday. Officials say that number was raised after they did an analysis, both from the air and from surveillance, of the results of that attack. So those are the headlines. Officials are also confirming what we said yesterday. That is that there are more leaflets being dropped over Baghdad. Some 200,000 dropped yesterday, more leaflets being dropped today that will encourage people to stay in their homes, to avoid irregular forces. The messages also include the theme that coalition forces are in Baghdad, but not to harm citizens and civilians. Bianca, back to you.
David Schuster from Doha, Qatar, thank you very much for that. I just want to let everyone know where David is right now at CENTCOM headquarters. There will be a briefing. We'll bring it to you live, 7 o'clock Eastern time today. Also coming after the break, we will have the latest headlines in Operation Iraqi Freedom and also an update from Carl Rochelle at the Pentagon. Stay with us right here on MSNBC.
According to the Wall Street Journal, indoor air pollution can be up to 5 times worse than the air outdoors. Clean air can be the difference between living comfortably or being miserable. Sharper Image introduces the ultimate clean air solution, the patented Ionic Breeze Quadra. Exclusive Xeneon technology cleans and circulates air without a fan or filters and is totally silent. Here's how it works. First, the Ionic Breeze positively charges the incoming air. Then the air is pulled toward the negatively charged grid like a magnet. The positively charged contaminants attach to the collection grid, and then the cleaned air is accelerated into the room, creating a fresh, clean smell. Cleaning takes only minutes. Just pull out the collection grid, wipe it with a damp cloth or sponge, and slip it back in. It's that simple. Studies have proven the Ionic Breeze removes allergens such as pollen and animal dander. It even removes airborne bacteria and some harmful chemicals from carpeting, paint, and household cleaners. It powers through smoke and offensive odors and leaves your house smelling fresh and clean. Don't be misled by the prices of other filters. Over 5 years, hidden costs of filter replacements and electricity can add up to over $1,000. The Ionic Breeze Quadra requires no filters and uses almost no electricity. Try it in your home for 2 months. If you don't love it, send it back. Sharper Image will give you a full refund. Through this exclusive offer, Sharper Image will send you a free bathroom Ionic Breeze. This compact plug-in helps even dirty bathrooms smell fresh and clean 24 hours a day. The $69 bathroom Ionic Breeze is yours free when you order today. And that's not all. Call now and be sure to ask about free shipping.
Call 1-800-866-8676. Help eliminate chemicals, allergens, and odors with the Ionic Breeze Quadra. That's 1-800-866-8676.
When you need the news, count on MSNBC.com with free video, because the news doesn't stop when you're at work. MSNBC.com, your online source for breaking news.
Baseball 2K3 on CN8. Power shots, golden gloves, today's hits, tomorrow's stars.
Bam! That ball smoked.
CN8, where hardball begins and the action never stops.
Unbelievable.
One pitch, one hit makes all the difference.
Hurry, hurry.
The future of baseball is on CN8.
What a play this is.
Baseball 2K3 premieres April 12th on CN8. Smart TV for curious people.
Now, at the touch of a button, our great collection of movies and shows is yours with On Demand from Comcast. Pick a title. He knows where you live. He knows what you fear.
Smile.
You know where to find him. On Comcast Digital Cable. Start this film instantly and watch the terror develop before your eyes.
Come on!
Order 1 hour photo. Control it for up to 24 hours. On demand, only from Comcast Digital Cable.
Scenes from the war. Welcome back to MSNBC's continuing coverage of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Hello, everyone. I'm Bianca Solorzano. At the bottom of the hour, here's what's happening right now. Reuters reports Iraqi fighters ambushed a U.S. military convoy just northwest of Baghdad. They say that one soldier was killed and another was injured after being attacked with rocket-propelled grenades and mortar bombs. Reuters also reporting this morning that the U.S. has positioned 7,000 troops at the Baghdad airport and is moving quickly to establish a small military village there. Meantime, military officials at Central Command tell NBC News most of the Republican Guard divisions in Iraq have been obliterated and none is now in Baghdad. However, officials say there are still units north of the capital yet to be engaged. And NBC News has learned U.S. troops found a massive complex of bunkers with a significant number of weapons about 100 miles south of Baghdad. The find in this MSNBC exclusive video includes landmines, cannons, and mysterious gray canisters that military experts say may contain chemical weapons. They are now being analyzed. We do bring you the very latest from Operation Iraqi Freedom every 15 minutes right here on MSNBC. First, retired Marine Lieutenant General Bernard Traynor is in our war room with the very latest military developments. Good morning, General.
Good morning, Bianca. Yes, the three Republican Guard divisions that were defending the approaches to Baghdad have been effectively destroyed, with the stragglers perhaps going back into Baghdad. But that means that Baghdad itself, its defenses are in the hands of the Special Republican Guard, the very special units, the Praetorian Guard of Saddam Hussein, and some of his irregular forces, his militia forces. Meanwhile, the Allied forces, with the Army having moved up in this direction and the Marines coming up in this direction, they are now establishing a cordon around Baghdad, with the Marines moving in this direction and the Army moving in this direction. And this report of an ambush of some American forces probably took place over in that area. We don't know the exact positions of the forces, but they are starting to establish a cordon which will extend around Baghdad to control egress and ingress into the area. Meantime, I think you can expect to see more of the sort of action where there's armored columns went into that downtown Baghdad yesterday to test out the defenses. So right now, they're preparing the battlefield for the final battle of Baghdad. Back to you, Bianca.
Okay, General, thank you very much for that. And now to the Pentagon, where officials say coalition forces have dealt significant psychological and strategic blows to Saddam Hussein's crumbling regime, including news that Saddam's notorious General Ali Hassan al-Majid may have been killed. We now get the latest from MSNBC's Carl Rochelle at the Pentagon. And Carl, I know that CENTCOM has confirmed that they positively identified Ali's bodyguard, but still no word if he was killed or not, correct?
That's correct, Bianca, but clearly they believe that Chemical Ali was in that house when the bombing took place. That's one of the reasons that they identified it, and one of the reasons they rolled those aircraft in on it. It's not something that, this is not a happenstance, something that pops up all of a sudden that here's where you go and here's where you move in. Those special forces were in there. They lased that target, if you will. They put a laser designator on the target and called in those F-16s to take a hit at it. Two of them, one of them dropped a 500-pound bomb. It fell a little short, we are told, but then the second plane came in and dropped two 500-pound bombs. And after the first one was dropped, we were told by officials that there was some scrambling around the individuals in the house trying to get out, but they didn't have time to do that because the next two bombs were right on the palace, the house, and they believe that everyone inside was killed in that attack. So it was a major strike. It is a major psychological blow. He is not only a cousin of Saddam Hussein, a general who controlled a number of the forces in the southern region, but he is notorious by reputation. The reason they call him Chemical Ali is because of his use of, or ordering the use of, chemical weapons against Iraqi Kurds, his own people, up at Halabja during the 1987-88 Gulf War. In following the Gulf War, the one between Iran and Iraq, and he also used chemical weapons on Iranian troops during that war. So his removal, if that is in fact the case, and officials believe it is the case, is a significant blow. The other significant blow is the ability to move into Baghdad and to hit targets at will in that area. And today they dropped more bombs and more missiles in the area. The power was out for some period of time. I believe it is still out, putting Baghdad in the dark again. According to David Schuster, they now upped the kill total in that attack yesterday to around 3,000. Earlier we had thought it was 2,000. But what happened is the U.S. and coalition forces saw through probes that they could move into the city. The resistance they met was light, so they went in and continued to fight. There are still skirmish areas in and around Baghdad right now, even though there are reports that the Republican Guard units that were in Baghdad and south of there are effectively reduced to no longer being a threat as a fighting force. We're told there is still a war going on. There are still other targets around the country. There is still a war plan in effect, and they will carry that war plan out. And it, of course, does involve those units that are up to the north. And, of course, you know, the fighting is still going on in Basra. So there is a great deal of fighting still going on in the country. There may be weeks yet to go. You know, the 4th Infantry Division, we are told now, should have the rest of its personnel in country by sometime next week. It'll be another 10 days after that before they are ready to roll, but that is a fully mechanized armor division with more M1 tanks and Abrams tanks and the Bradley fighting vehicles that they can bring to bear on whatever forces continue to go. This is one of the most interesting sights I think I have seen. They push. Here goes the statue of Saddam Hussein, Bianca.
And down he goes. You don't even need words for that one. Just look at the picture. All right, Carl Rochelle, live at the Pentagon. Thank you very much for that update. In the midst of the fighting, a welcome sight on the outskirts of Baghdad. American troops are being greeted by crowds of cheering Iraqis. MSNBC's Bob Arnott is with the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force. He spoke with us earlier today about the mood there on the streets.
Well, this is Greater Baghdad. All of these people were in their houses, afraid to come out for days. They have no electricity here. They have no fresh water. These kids here have all been pretty scared. Assalamu alaikum. Ahlan wa sahlan. Kayf halik? Alhamdulillah wa anta. So you can see they're clearly happy. They've been in their houses. They've been worried. They're saying, you know, what's going to happen to us? What will happen to us? You know, and if you look at these kids here, look at this. I mean, they're delightful little kids. Many of them don't have shoes, you see. It's a poor town. It's a town that Saddam Hussein has not done much for. There are no paved roads in here, and yet they're delightful kids. Baghdad. Lam aw la? Just ask them, do you want to go to Baghdad? They say, no, we really don't want to go to Baghdad. It's interesting that when you talk to people out here, they're very warm, they're very friendly, they are just anxious for their future. They're delighted that Saddam Hussein is gone. And that's important because, remember, now that we're within Greater Baghdad, we're no longer in that sort of Shiite South, which has always hated Saddam Hussein. So it's, I think, gratifying now to see this reaction. I have been in many different places around the world where you have a liberation where you might have a war that's ended. And usually for the first 2 or 3 days, people are friendly. They do come out of their homes. And then as things change, you end up in a little bit more of the Wild West. And so the Marines have to be ready for that on a sort of day-to-day basis. They, again, are fighting this sort of 3-block war, gunfire in the background, bombs in the background, and yet trying to make certain that these people of Iraq are okay. We've asked what's happening in the center of Baghdad. Very mixed message. People say there are problems, not getting much feedback. We see some people starting to trickle out. Usually in a situation like this, after several days, you may have many people coming out. We do know from the villagers here that there are hostages being kept in Baghdad, family members.